Welcome back, everyone, to Sip and Talk. Okay, I have to share this. I was looking at our back-end data.
Oh, yeah. What'd you find?
Get this. A full 40% of our listeners are tuning in from Taiwan right now. Isn't that amazing?
Wow, 40%. That's actually outstanding growth. Hello, Taiwan.
Seriously. So hello to all of you over there. And it actually ties in perfectly because today's topic came straight from listener requests, especially from that region.
That makes sense. We love getting requests. So what's on the docket?
Well, we're tackling a narrative, a claim you hear quite a bit in certain discussions over there. It's this idea that Taiwan's economic success, becoming rich and strong, is basically, well, thanks to China's help, like dependent on the mainland market.
Ah, yes. That particular narrative, the idea that Taiwan needed China to get where it is today, it's definitely a politically charged one.
Exactly. It gets used a lot.
So I think our mission for today's Sip and Talk is pretty clear, right? We need to look at the facts, use some hard data, take that international perspective we always aim for, and really step-by-step deconstruct this claim. Let's find out where that prosperity actually came from.
Let's do it. Okay, so phase one, let's rewind the clock a bit. The core of the dependence argument is that the Chinese market was essential for Taiwan's initial economic takeoff. But, when did Taiwan actually become an Asian tiger?
Yeah, the timeline is crucial here. Taiwan's economic miracle, that Asian tiger status, was pretty much cemented by the 1980s. This was way, way before China really opened up its economy in a way that could provide a significant market.
Right, before China was this huge economic player.
Exactly. Taiwan's rise came from decades of its own policy planning, building its own capabilities. It wasn't waiting for help.
And that early foundational money, it didn't come from across the strait, did it?
Nope, not at all. The really critical early external support came from the United States. We're talking about roughly $1.5 billion in U.S. aid between 1951 and 1965.
Wow, that's a lot for back then.
It was transformative. And it wasn't just cash stuffed in pockets. It went into fundamental things, building power grids, transportation, roads, ports. Plus, it supported really important early land reforms.
Land reforms? How did that help industry?
Well, it basically changed the agricultural structure, which freed up capital that could then be reinvested into starting new industries. It kickstarted things.
Okay, so the foundations were U.S. aid and smart internal moves. What were those key policy shifts Taiwan made?
They made a really strategic pivot. Initially, like many developing economies, they tried import substitution, making things themselves instead of importing. But then they shifted gears hard towards an export-oriented strategy.
So selling outwards.
Aggressively selling outwards. They focused on producing goods, starting with things like textiles and light manufacturers, specifically for developed markets. Think the U.S., Japan, Europe. They plugged into the global trade network early on.
And it wasn't just about factories, right? There was something else they invested in heavily.
Oh, absolutely. The secret sauce, you could argue, was human capital. They made a huge bet on education. In 1968, they brought in 9 years of compulsory education for everyone.
9 years back in 68. That's quite forward thinking.
It really was. And the result? By the 1980s, the literacy rate was nearly 100%. This created this incredibly skilled, adaptable workforce ready for more complex manufacturing and eventually the high-tech boom.
Okay, this brings us to a data point that I think just blows the whole China dependence timeline argument out of the water. Let's look at 1980 IMF data.
Yes, the numbers here are stark. In 1980, Taiwan's GDP per capita was already over $2,300 US.
Okay, $2,300. And mainland China at the same time.
Mainland China's per capita GDP in 1980 was about $190.
$190 compared to $2,300.
It's not even close. It's more than a tenfold difference. Taiwan was already solidly a middle to high income economy, deeply integrated globally, decades before the mainland economy was large enough to realistically help or offer a major consumer market.
So the prosperity was built independently. The miracle happened before the supposed helper was even in the picture economically.
The historical facts are just overwhelming on that point. Taiwan built its own success story.
Okay, that covers the early history pretty definitively. Let's jump forward to the modern argument, because that's where you hear about these huge trade numbers today. Like, what is it, 35, maybe 40% of Taiwan's exports go to China, including Hong Kong.
Right, and that 35-40% figure is the cornerstone of the modern dependence narrative.
Ugh.
It sounds like a lot, and politically it's a very potent number to throw around.
But it needs unpacking. What does exports to China actually mean in this specific context?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because very often China isn't the final consumer market for these goods. It functions more like a a processing center, a transit hub.
Like an assembly workshop for the rest of the world.
Precisely. Think about Taiwan's biggest export powerhouse, semiconductors. Companies like TSMC ship incredibly complex, high-value intermediate goods like advanced chips.
The brains of the operation.
Exactly. They ship those to factories on the mainland. These factories then assemble them into final products, iPhones, NVIDIA graphics cards, laptops, whatever.
Sure.
And then those finished goods are immediately exported out again, mostly to the US, to Europe, to consumers all over the world.
So Taiwan is actually feeding global demand for tech, and China is just one stop along the assembly line.
That's a much more accurate picture. The value is in the Taiwanese technology and design. The assembly could theoretically happen elsewhere. If those factories were in, say, Vietnam or Mexico, the core components would still likely come from Taiwan.
That distinction is critical. Okay, what about specific trade deals? We hear this term wrongly letting profit. It's often used to describe agreements like ECFA, the one signed back in 2010.
Yes, wrongly. That term itself is, well, politically loaded. It frames these deals as if Beijing is generously handing out benefits, letting Taiwan share in the profits.
Right, like it's a subsidy. But if ECFA was supposed to be this massive profit-sharing bonanza, why was the actual economic impact on Taiwan's overall GDP so small?
It's fascinating, isn't it? Multiple analyses showed ECFA probably boosted Taiwan's total GDP by less than 0.5%, maybe 0.4% or something like that.
Less than 0.5%, that's tiny.
It's minimal. And the reason is the tariff reductions in ECFA mostly applied to relatively minor goods or things that weren't Taiwan's main export drivers anyway. The really high-value stuff, the tech components, they were already moving globally, often with low or zero tariffs under other international agreements.
So the economic benefit was marginal, but the political framing was huge.
Exactly. It created a perception of benefit, which then became a tool.
A lever for punishment.
Precisely. We've seen it used that way. When political tensions rise, suddenly Beijing might ban imports of certain Taiwanese agricultural products like pineapples or groupers, often citing dubious reasons. Or they threaten the ECFA agreement itself. It becomes less about trade, more about political coercion, a binding tool.
But Taiwan's shown some ability to adapt, even when China uses those levers, right? Like with tourism. I remember the concerns when mainland group tours were restricted around 2016.
That's a great example of resilience. Yes, China cut way back in allowing group tours to Taiwan. And sure, there was a short-term dip and some panic in the tourism sector. But Taiwan didn't just fold, they pivoted. They actively courted independent travelers, focusing on attracting visitors from Japan, South Korea, Southeast Asia, Hong Kong.
Diversifying their visitor base.
Exactly. And it worked. By 2023, 2024, tourism revenue was basically back to pre-pandemic levels, even without those large mainland groups. It showed the market could find other sources, that it wasn't solely dependent.
Okay, so that leads us to a really key moment where Taiwan seemed to make a conscious choice to avoid deeper economic integration that could increase that kind of vulnerability. I'm thinking of the sunflower movement in 2014.
Yes, the sunflower movement was absolutely pivotal. It successfully blocked the ratification of something called the CSSTA, the Cross-Strait Service Trade Agreement.
And that agreement would have gone much further than ECFA, right?
Much, much further. CSSTA was designed to open up huge swaths of Taiwan's service sectors to mainland investment and companies. We're talking finance, banking, telecommunications, publishing, even healthcare. Really sensitive areas.
What was the big risk everyone saw in that? Why the massive protests?
The risk was essentially opening the door to potentially overwhelming economic influence and control from the mainland in critical infrastructure and services. People worried it would hollow out local industries, increase unemployment in those sectors, and maybe most importantly, give Beijing immense leverage over Taiwan's economy and society.
Like what happened in Hong Kong after their similar agreement, SIPO?
That was the comparison many people made, yes. After SIPA, Hong Kong saw a significant influx of mainland capital and influence that arguably eroded some of its economic autonomy and changed the business landscape quite dramatically. Blocking CSSDA was seen as preventing a similar path for Taiwan.
And it wasn't just about economic control, right? There were also fears about technology and intellectual property, especially looking at what happened elsewhere, like South Korea.
Ah, yes. The South Korean example is a really important kind of cautionary tale here. After South Korea signed its free trade agreement with China around 2015, they experienced some pretty serious issues with technology theft.
Specifically with their big companies.
Specifically with giants like Samsung. There were documented cases, even leading to U.S. indictments in 2018, of Chinese entities allegedly stealing critical intellectual property related to Samsung's advanced memory chips, DRAM, and NAND flash.
Wow. So actual industrial espionage facilitated by closer economic ties.
That was the accusation, and it definitely raised alarms globally about the risks of IP leakage when dealing with certain state-backed actors.
So if Taiwan saw this happening to Korea, why did they still allow any tech investment from the mainland, even if CSSTI was blocked, like TSMC having some fabs there?
That's where you see Taiwan's own strategic calculation. They learned the lesson, arguably. Taiwan maintains incredibly strict controls on technology transfer, especially for its most advanced capabilities. Look at TSMC's strategy in China. They have invested, yes, but almost exclusively in facilities that produce mature process nodes. Think 28-nanometer chips, which are several generations behind the cutting edge.
So nothing close to the really advanced.
Exactly. It's a very deliberate firewall. The crown jewels, the 5-nanometer, 3-nanometer, the future 2-nanometer tech that development and high-volume production stays firmly in Taiwan. It's a defensive strategy to prevent the leakage of their most critical world-leading technology.
That makes sense. Protect the core advantage. So post-Sunflower Movement, post-CSSTA blockage, Taiwan really doubled down on diversifying away from the mainland market, right? This Mu southbound policy became a major thing.
Correct. Starting around 2016, the new southbound policy became official government strategy. It explicitly aimed to strengthen ties, trade, investment, cultural exchange with countries in Southeast Asia, South Asia like India, Australia, and New Zealand.
And did it work? Did the numbers actually shift?
Oh, the results are pretty clear. Trade between Taiwan and these new southbound partner countries surged. It went from about $100 billion in 2016 up to around $170 billion by 2023. That's a huge increase.
$70 billion increase in just, 7 years?
Yeah, a really significant jump. It showed a deliberate and successful effort to build alternative economic partnerships.
So what did this diversification do to that headline dependence figure we talked about earlier, the 35–40%?
It brought it down significantly. By 2023, Taiwan's export dependence on the mainland China market, including Hong Kong, had dropped from that peak of around 40% to below 30%.
Below 30%, that's a major shift.
It is. And here's the kicker. Based on the latest data coming out for 2024, it looks like China is actually no longer Taiwan's single largest export market. The U.S. and ASEAN bloc have become increasingly important. Taiwan effectively managed to rebalance its economic relationships.
Okay, so they proved they could diversify. Let's talk about Taiwan's strength today, then. Its independent core competitiveness. What makes it so crucial to the global economy, totally separate from the China market question?
Well, you can't talk about Taiwan's modern economy without talking about semiconductors. It's just dominant, globally irreplaceable, really.
How dominant are we talking?
The numbers are staggering. Taiwan accounts for over 60% of the entire world's semiconductor foundry manufacturing capacity. And one company, TSMC, holds over half of that global market share by itself.
60% of the world's chips.
The really advanced ones, especially. When you think about the chips powering AI for companies like NVIDIA, the processors in every iPhone from Apple, the CPUs and GPUs from AMD, the choke point, the essential manufacturing hub, is Taiwan. The world literally cannot build modern technology without them right now.
And that kind of critical expertise, that must attract investment regardless of geopolitics.
It absolutely does. It's a huge magnet for global tech investment. We've seen major players pouring money in, especially since around 2018. Google's building a massive new data center in Tainan, set to finish in 2025. Microsoft announced a $1 billion plan just this year to expand its AI research centers in Taiwan.
So the big tech companies are betting on Taiwan's tech leadership.
They follow the talent and the unique capabilities. That's where the innovation's happening at the highest level in that specific field.
And looking beyond just chips, what do the overall economic numbers say about Taiwan's health today?
The recent metrics are really quite impressive, showing a high-quality independent economy. Their GDP per capita recently hit $38,000.
$38,000, wow.
Yeah, notably, that meant it actually surpassed South Korea's per capita GDP for the first time in something like 22 years.
That's a huge milestone.
It is. Plus, the Taiwanese stock market has been hitting record highs, like 26,000 points. The total market value is over $3 trillion now, which actually ranks it 8th globally, ahead of countries like Germany.
Ahead of Germany? Seriously?
Seriously. And this is alongside very strong GDP growth recently, like over 8% in one quarter of 2025, while keeping unemployment incredibly low at around 3.4%. They also consistently rank really high in global competitiveness, like 6th in the world and in the top 10 for innovation.
So if you put all these pieces together, the history, the strategic shifts, the current dominance in tech, the overall economic health, what's the final verdict on where Taiwan's strength comes from?
I think the conclusion is pretty clear. Taiwan's economic power is fundamentally built on internal factors. Smart long-term policy, huge investments in education and R&D. They spend about 3.5% of their GDP on research and development, which is very high. Plus strong institutions, rule of law, transparency, and of course developing that absolutely indispensable role in the global high-tech supply chain. It wasn't reliant on help from China.
It was built from within and by strategically engaging with the entire world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The evidence shows the success was established independently, and the later diversification moves, like the new SoundOn policy, demonstrate they have the resilience and capability to thrive even without relying heavily on that one specific market next door.
Okay, that step-by-step breakdown really clarifies things. It debunks the simple dependence narrative pretty thoroughly, but, it raises a final, maybe more challenging question for the future.
What are you thinking?
Well, if Taiwan's economic fundamentals are so strong and resilient, why do we see this constant, maybe even increasing, focus on things like cognitive warfare or soft power pressure from Beijing, spreading fear narratives, pushing the dependence idea internally, trying to divide public opinion?
That's a very sharp point. Because the economic argument for dependence is weak, the focus shifts to psychological manipulation, doesn't it? Trying to undermine confidence from within. The economic reality might be robust, but the political and psychological pressure is constant and, frankly, corrosive.
Exactly. So I guess the final thought we want to leave you, our listener, with today is this. We've seen the evidence for Taiwan's economic resilience, but how effectively can Taiwan, as a society, counteract these ongoing psychological campaigns? The ones designed specifically to erode public belief in its own strength, its own institutions, its democracy. That battle seems like it's fought less on spreadsheets and more in people's minds.
That's a really critical question to ponder moving forward. Thanks for digging into this with us today.
Absolutely. And if you found this conversation insightful, please do hit that subscribe button for Sip and Talk wherever you get your podcasts. Oh, and before we sign off, quick shout out to our good friend Mickey. Check out the YouTube channel, Mickytolife, Mickytolife. Always fun stuff over there. Memes, music, wine, travel vlogs, you name it. Always a good time.
Definitely check Mickey out.
We'll catch you all on the next Sip and Talk.